Um, a friend had told me, because I was scared to death to apply for a job. I mean, uh, I I was pretty sure that, you know, I felt like I was defective. Being a person with a disability, I feel I'm defective. I feel I'm not worthy, you know, and so I'm already going in there feeling defeated. So this friend told me, she says, well, what you do is you go apply for jobs that you don't even really want. So it's okay. So I went into King Soopers. They had a sign on the door, you know, come in and apply today. So I went in, I went up there, and they said, you know, and I told them about the disability. I said, yes, I am visually impaired. And, you know, they said, well, can you cut food? I said, yes. You know, can you cook? I said, yes. They said, you're hired.
Awesome.
So they were really pretty good about that, and very supportive. I worked there for almost a year. Then I had a friend who was working at a school and asked me if I wanted to be a teacher's assistant, paraprofessional, and this was in a special classroom of children who are disabled. And I got this job when I interviewed because of my disability.
Interesting.
Yeah, so it was because of my disability that I got the job, because they felt that I had the understanding to help these children reach their full potential, to help them, to treat them as if they were normal, treat them as you would, you know, want them. Don't set the expectations low. You know, you set the expectations as you would for anyone. And sometimes when you raise the expectations, you raise the person's ability.
Absolutely.
So I did that until there were budget cuts. Then I went looking for another job, and then I was turned down for the same type of position in the same types of classrooms because of my disability, because they felt that I was a safety risk with children. Yeah. This was extremely devastating to me because I felt, you know, at this point, I have raised 4 children. I have worked in a classroom with children. I also crossed over into the kindergarten classroom and did things with the kindergarten classroom. And now I'm considered a safety risk with children. I was definitely broken at that time. Very heartbroken, very upset. So I applied to the Colorado Center for the Blind, and I went as a student there. I felt that if I could put something like that on my resume, I would be telling people, yeah, I get it. I'm blind. I know that. But see, these are the skills I can do because, you know, even though I'm blind, I still have the skills.
Yep,
I have
absolutely.
skills of a blind person. I have the alternative skills. I can do these things. And I have to tell you, that was really a changing point in my life. I want to say that's when I began to learn about the ADA. That's when I began to learn about my rights and about what what my rights are, and that was wrong to not hire me, to tell me that I was a safety risk with children.
And so is the Colorado Center for the Blind, is that somewhere that you graduate from, or you're just kind of there for a predetermined amount of time?
You do graduate. So each individual has their own program designed for them specifically, depending on their own needs. Now, by this time, I had already taught myself Braille with a little bit of help from the American Red Cross. And so I was already starting to learn, starting to become proficient in reading Braille. But at the Colorado Center for the Blind, I learned that there is a community out there, and that I'm not the only person in the world, you know, who is visually impaired, blind, low vision, whatever term you want to call it. I'm not the only one. And I'm not the only person with a disability. I'm not the only person who has to fight for my rights. And, you know, that there are others out there. And they helped to give me the courage and the strength and ability to stand up for myself and to be able to go out and face the world and get, you know, and get good, decent jobs. My first job after Colorado Center for, oh, you asked about graduation. So you do graduate. It's not like a class graduation. It's more like an individual graduation. And what they do for graduation is, you know, for people with some vision like I have, they put blindfolds on you. And then they drive you around in circles in different directions to kind of disorient you so you can't tell where you're at. And then they drop you off. And then you have to find your way back to the center all on your own. And, you know, and then when you get back to the center, you ring a bell and you go on the speaker and you tell everybody where you were dropped off. Cool. It was awesome. And then also as part of your ceremony, you create a meal, the graduate, I did, create a meal for everybody there. So, so I cooked for about 60 people.
Wow.
A meal for 60 people. And then, you know, and then the rest, you know, you have like your banquet and things.
Oh, very cool.
It was absolutely amazing.
Wow,
so,
what an experience.
Yes.
And did your whole family get to be there?
Yes. Well, those who were able, I can't remember how old the kids were at the time.
Yeah.
But I know my husband was there. I want to say the kids were there. 95. Tim might not. My oldest might not have been there. He might have been in college.
Cool.
But
I'm sure your husband was beaming with pride for you.
He was. I'm sure he was happy. So, yeah.
So where'd you go after that?
I worked for the Colorado Center for the Blind for 3 years.
Cool.
And when their funding, you know, they ran out of funds, then I worked for a friend of mine. She is a chiropractor. She also is blind, but she is a chiropractor. And I worked in her office for a couple of years. I was like a volunteer receptionist while I was looking for work. Plus, I also did direct sales for Pampered Chef.
Oh, wow.
I love Pampered Chef products. You'll find many of them around, you know, 2000, the year 2000 products in my house. And so I sold those for a while. I wasn't really great at it, but it got me a lot of products and I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed their products. And then out of the blue, I get a phone call from another Center for Independent Living, the Center for People with Disabilities. And they called and they asked me, they said, well, I don't know how long your resume has been here, but are you still interested in the job? And after I picked my job off the floor, I'm going, what job is this? So someone I knew that worked there had submitted my resume for a position as an OIB skills trainer, which stands for Older Individuals Who Are Blind. It's a special program for seniors who are losing their sight. And I got that job and worked that job for 8 years.
Wow.
And then I thought I was retired, but DVR was still looking out for me. And in 2015, I was told about a position at Atlantis. And I applied for the job. And when I went in for the interview, because they were looking for full-time, I went in. And by this time, I'm definitely over 50 years of age. And I told them, I said, I cannot work full-time. I figured I'm going to be open. I'm going to be honest. I'm going to tell them what I know. I'm going to tell them what I don't know. And they still hired me anyway.
And you've been here ever since.
I've been there since. Yeah. Yeah. So I pretty much appreciate it. Yeah.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
And how has, working at a center, working at a place that we hope is disability centered and run by people with disabilities, how have you seen the ADA kind of impact either daily life here at your job, or do you think that there are any differences in how you're treated as an employee?
Well, I have to say Atlantis is, and so was the Center for People with Disabilities. These are organizations, these nonprofit organizations are organizations that have a good understanding of the capabilities of people with disabilities. And they're really understanding of what's called reasonable accommodations. I want to say that especially Atlantis has a much better understanding of it than I do. When I think of reasonable, I think of cheap, okay? I'm thinking of what's the cheapest way we can make this work. But I would have to say Atlantis has stepped up whatever I have needed. Whenever I have expressed an issue related to my disability and my ability to work, Atlantis has been there for me. I was using a program called JAWS, which stands for Job Access with Speech. This is an assistive tool. It's a screen reader that goes on the computer. So the computer tells me what's on the screen. But since I have some vision, I also like to use screen magnification. And when the program that I was using, which was my own program called Magic, which was the magnification program, when it became incompatible with the version of JAWS that I was using, Atlantis was willing to put out the expense of buying the program, which is called Fusion, which takes two different programs, the screen reading program and the magnification program called Zoom Text, and puts them together. And these things are not cheap. These technological things are rather expensive in my book. I know I couldn't run out and just buy it without saving up for it. But that's what allows me to do my job. And that's not the only understanding. There are other issues that people have. As far as Social Security is concerned, my only disability is blindness. Mm-hmm. I want to say age might have a little bit to do with other disabilities that I have. But, people get sick, people have illnesses. When I worked at the Center for People with Disabilities, there was discovered I had a brain tumor. Wow. And when this brain tumor, I went to my boss to explain that I probably wouldn't be working anymore because of the brain tumor. No, he said, take what time you need. He says, what can we do to help? And I had surgery, had the brain tumor removed. And when I ran out of my PTO, people donated PTO to me so that the 3 months that I was out of work, I was never without income.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah. So, I only wish that other organizations could understand about reasonable accommodation and, and that people with disabilities wouldn't have to fight so much to get those.
Yes. And Debra, for anyone watching who might not know what a reasonable accommodation is, could you maybe just briefly define what that means to you or what it's meant to your life?
A reasonable accommodation is when the employer helps provide for the consumer, not necessarily, it's not always a financial expense. For me, it was to get the adaptive software so that I could access the computer the same way that a sighted person could access the computer. For somebody in a wheelchair, maybe working at a service counter, it might mean lowering the counter